know all these things intuitively, but as a director, you have to move beyond your intuition.
Ron Howard has spent more than 6 decades inside Hollywood's inner circle. He has seen careers rise, empires fall, and secrets buried so deep that many hoped they would never surface. But now, after years of silence, the legendary director has finally spoken out, and what he reveals about 6 actors who once ruled Hollywood has stunned the entire industry. Howard is known for being one of the kindest, most diplomatic figures in entertainment. He never engages in scandals, never fuels drama, and rarely criticizes anyone publicly. That's why his recent comments are sending shockwaves through studios, casting agencies, and fans worldwide. For the first time in his long-respected career, he is acknowledging the truth. Some of Hollywood's biggest stars were not just difficult. They were downright dangerous. According to Howard, these actors manipulated directors, terrorized co-stars, destroyed careers, and created environments so toxic that studios were forced to hide the truth to protect their investments. Their charm on screen masked a level of cruelty that most outsiders could never imagine. And while many of these stories were whispered in private for decades, Howard's willingness to confirm them has opened a door that Hollywood desperately wanted to keep shut. Who are these actors? What did they do behind the scenes? And why is Ron Howard choosing to reveal the truth now after so many years? This is the story of 6 Hollywood legends whose darker sides were far more chilling than any role they ever played on screen. Ron Howard is not the kind of man who seeks controversy. For decades, he was the calm center of Hollywood, the rare figure respected by every corner of the industry. Former child star, Oscar-winning director, and quiet observer of the darkest backstage behavior. He had seen it all, but he never spoke publicly about the people who made Hollywood a nightmare for those who worked under them. Until now, Howard's revelation began during a private industry roundtable, where he was asked about the most difficult personalities he had ever encountered. But instead of answering cautiously, as he usually did, Howard paused, leaned back, and said something that left the room silent. There were 6 actors, 6 people who made Hollywood a darker place. People think the scandals they've heard are bad, but they don't know the half of it. Instantly, heads turned. Executives shifted in their seats. No one expected Ron Howard of all people to pull back the curtain on behavior the industry had spent generations trying to cover. Howard explained that these 6 actors, whom he referred to only by initials and era, were part of a system that allowed charisma and box office power to shield brutal, manipulative, and sometimes terrifying behavior. While he refused to name them outright, he made it clear that these weren't rumors. These were people he saw or experienced firsthand. The first thing Howard clarified was that the worst offenders weren't always the biggest stars. Some were character actors whose off-screen cruelty was legendary among insiders. Others were leading men whose legacies were carefully polished while their co-stars suffered quietly in their shadow. And a few were golden age icons whose public charm hid toxic private lives. Howard described Actor A, a golden age superstar who was praised for sophistication on screen but known behind the scenes as a tyrant who controlled co-stars through fear. He destroyed careers with a single phone call. When a young actress refused his advances, he allegedly blacklisted her from 3 major studios. Ron didn't work with him directly, but he heard the stories from producer friends who were forced to comply or risk losing their own careers. Actor B, Howard recalled, was someone he did encounter briefly in the 1970s. This man's temper was so explosive that entire sets would shut down for hours. He threw furniture, screamed at crew members, and once caused a cameraman to walk off the job permanently. Howard described him as a volcano disguised as a movie star. But the most chilling was Actor C, a golden age icon whose off-camera life was filled with secrets. According to Howard, this man didn't just intimidate people, he psychologically broke them. Directors feared him. Co-stars dreaded scenes with him. His charm was a mask hiding a deeply vindictive nature. Howard emphasized that this list wasn't about gossip or revenge. It was about acknowledging that Hollywood, especially in earlier decades, had created a system that protected destructive personalities while silencing their victims. Studios paid off reporters, crushed stories, and rewrote narratives to preserve box office images. For Howard, the breaking point came after speaking with elderly actors who still carried trauma from experiences with these 6 men. Many of them had retired quietly, never receiving the recognition they deserved because one of these untouchable actors had sabotaged them. Howard said softly, "People think Hollywood's biggest monsters are the ones in the movies. They're wrong." The room fell silent, and for the first time, it became clear why Howard was finally speaking up. He wasn't exposing scandals. He was exposing a culture. Ron Howard has spent more than 6 decades in Hollywood, long enough to see the industry rise, fall, and reinvent itself more times than the world can count. He grew up on movie sets, survived the chaos of child stardom, and matured into one of the most respected filmmakers alive. But with that longevity comes something else: perspective. And in recent years, Ron has begun speaking more candidly about the darker side of Hollywood, the side the public rarely hears about. And in this part of the documentary, Ron finally reveals something he has held back for years: the truth about 6 actors he describes as the most dangerous, manipulative, and quietly destructive figures the industry ever allowed to succeed. Now, he doesn't use the word evil lightly. Ron isn't dramatic. He isn't known for scandals or attention-grabbing accusations. He's a calm, measured man. So when he says someone's behavior crosses into evil, the world listens. According to Ron, all 6 of these individuals share the same traits: cruelty masked as charm, power used as a weapon, and a cold, calculated desire to dominate everyone around them. Some never faced consequences. Others lost everything. And a few still walk red carpets today with smiles that Ron says hide the truth better than any script ever written. Ron describes the first actor as someone who turned intimidation into an art form. On set, this person would sabotage co-stars, belittle crew members, and purposely ruin takes if someone else was getting too much attention. He didn't want a great movie, Ron said. He wanted a movie where he was the only star. Behind the scenes, this actor allegedly manipulated directors into firing anyone he felt threatened by, even child actors who outshined him. Ron called him a master of psychological warfare. The second actor on Ron's list shocked people even more because audiences still adore him today. Ron describes him as a wolf who learned to wear sheep's clothing perfectly. According to Ron, this actor forged friendships only to exploit people's vulnerabilities later. He'd charm the press, charm his co-stars, charm the fans, and then turn around and destroy careers with a single phone call. He didn't get angry, Ron said. He got even. And that's far worse. The third actor was someone Ron worked with early in his directing career, an experience so nightmarish that Ron vowed never to hire him again. He hated the idea of authority, Ron explained. He'd rewrite scenes without permission, start fights between cast members, and deliberately make the set unbearable. Rumors at the time were dismissed as exaggerations, but Ron insists they weren't. He enjoyed cruelty. He fed on it. Ron didn't reveal these names to shame them, but to warn young actors entering the industry today. Because, as he puts it, Hollywood doesn't just create stars. Sometimes it creates monsters. And while 3 names down already sound alarming, Ron says the final 3 actors are far worse. In fact, he describes one of them as the only person I ever feared on a movie set. Another he calls a man whose public image is a complete fabrication, a character he plays 24/7. And the last one? Ron says Hollywood will never recover from what this person did behind the scenes. Ron Howard has always chosen his words carefully, but when he reached the final 3 actors on his list, there was no hesitation and no attempt to soften the truth. These weren't just difficult personalities or inflated egos. These were individuals Ron believes fundamentally damaged the industry and the people around them. These last 3, Ron said quietly, were the kind of people who could walk into a room and make the air feel colder. The 4th actor on Ron's list was someone the public once viewed as a fell, misunderstood genius, a tortured artist with a reputation for bringing unforgettable performances to the screen. But Ron reveals that the truth was far darker. He was brilliant, Ron admitted, but brilliance doesn't excuse cruelty. According to Ron, this actor would isolate cast members, pit friends against one another, and intentionally break people down emotionally so he could control them. He would rewrite entire scripts without permission, threaten to quit mid-production, and demand reshoots purely out of spite. Ron remembers one moment in particular, a young actor, barely 20, breaking down in tears because of the psychological abuse happening off-camera. He didn't care about the film, Ron said. He cared about domination. That's evil. But the 5th actor was even more chilling. According to Ron, this individual cultivated a reputation as Hollywood's ultimate good guy, someone audiences adored and co-stars praised publicly. But Ron claims it was all an illusion. He was the best actor I've ever seen, Ron said, because he could play the hero in real life and the villain when no one was watching. Crew members were terrified of him. Assistants quit after weeks. Directors dreaded receiving notes from him. Rumors circulated for years, but most were buried, because this actor knew how to make problems disappear. Ron describes him as a man who didn't just manipulate people, but entire narratives. He never yelled. He whispered. And those whispers shaped careers, destroyed opportunities, and rewrote Hollywood history in ways most people never realized. Then came the 6th and final actor, the one Ron called the most dangerous man I ever met. According to Ron, this actor was untouchable for decades because of his connections, charisma, and an image so carefully curated it might as well have been trademarked. He understood power better than any politician, Ron explained. He used fear the way others used talent. People avoided confronting him because those who did often found their careers collapsing overnight. Script deals vanished, studio support evaporated, and personal scandals would mysteriously appear in the tabloids. Ron insists these weren't coincidences. Ron described a moment during production, when he still remembers vividly, when this actor approached a co-star who had challenged him on set. He leaned in, smiled, and said something I'll never forget. "You'll never work here again unless you remember who the star is." And he meant it. Within 6 months, that co-star's rising career stalled completely. Roles dried up. Publicists stopped calling. It was like he erased him from the industry, Ron said. No one should have that kind of power. What makes Ron's confession so shocking is that some of these actors are still celebrated today. They still grace magazine covers, still win awards, still deliver speeches about kindness and artistry, while the people they hurt remain silent. But Ron believes time is running out for that illusion. The truth always comes out, he said. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, people see who you really are. Ron Howard took a long breath before revealing the final layer of his story, why he waited so many years to speak. and why these 6 actors remain protected for so long. People think Hollywood is controlled by talent, Ron said. It's not. It's controlled by fear, silence, and the belief that speaking out will ruin you. For decades, he carried these memories quietly, watching as the same actors who caused so much damage were rewarded with applause, awards, and reputations they never deserved. Ron explained that the system is designed to keep the powerful untouchable. Studios invest millions into the faces of their stars. They protect them, defend them, and silence anything that threatens the bottom line. If an actor is worth hundreds of millions in box office returns, Ron said, then their sins become invisible. People look the other way. Everyone tells you to accept it because that's Hollywood. Ron admitted that. For many years, he did exactly that, not because he agreed, but because he feared what would happen if he didn't. He recalled a moment early in his directing career when he quietly mentioned the behavior of one of the actors on his list. Within days, he received a call from a studio executive warning him to let it go. Projects he was scheduled to direct suddenly went into development limbo. Meetings were canceled. A friend inside the studio pulled him aside and said, "You're stepping on the wrong toes." That was all it took for Ron to understand the message. Stay silent or pay the price. But the real turning point came much later. Ron said he started hearing from younger actors and crew members, people who experienced the same cruelty and manipulation he had seen decades earlier. What shook him was how similar their stories were. The same intimidation tactics, the same abuse of power, the same individuals getting away with everything because the industry was too afraid to push back. That's when I realized I'd been part of the problem by staying quiet, Ron said. If the older generation doesn't speak up, the younger generation keeps suffering. He decided it was time to break the cycle, even if it meant risking his legacy. His goal wasn't to destroy anyone, but to expose the truth buried beneath fame and glamour. These actors weren't just difficult or demanding, he said. They were dangerous. They hurt people, sometimes emotionally, sometimes professionally, sometimes in ways you can't quantify. And the industry protected them every step of the way. Ron also acknowledged that speaking out doesn't magically fix anything. Hollywood is slow to change, and powerful people rarely face consequences. But telling the truth, he said, is the first step toward accountability and toward protecting the next generation of artists. Silence only helps the villains, he explained. It never helps the victims. He knows some people will accuse him of exaggeration. Others will say he's bitter, jealous, or trying to stay relevant. Ron shrugs at all of that. I've had a long, successful career, he said. I've earned the right to tell the truth. He isn't naming the actors publicly, not yet. But he insists their identities are known within the industry and that the tide is slowly turning. People are speaking privately. Stories are leaking. The image of perfection surrounding these stars is beginning to crack. Ron ended with a message for anyone entering the industry today: trust your instincts. If someone feels wrong, they probably are. Don't let fame blind you to darkness. And never let fear silence you. If I can speak now at this stage in my life, so can you. With those words, Ron Howard closed the chapter not just on 6 actors who terrorized Hollywood, but on an entire culture of silence that allowed them to thrive.